So it's not like we can just go out and pass a regulation or get the legislature to pass a new law. If we need to change that, we're going to have to come back and amend the Constitution, which in Colorado is not all that tough, but it's a pain.
That wasn't hard at all.
It's easier to deal with the legislature, let me put it that way. But I basically think, as with many issues around the development of and use of both hemp and cannabis, we kind of need to let the issues develop and see what problems there are and see how they're approached. Now, the policy is going to be under the regulations that when there is hemp that exceeds that amount, law enforcement will be notified. Now, the question that Veronica asked me to quickly address is, what will law enforcement do with that when they're notified? And that's going to depend on your law enforcement jurisdiction. Colorado's divided into 22 judicial districts. Mine is one of them. We will have one approach, and I can assure you that it's not. We have a lot of better things to do than go around and prosecute people that end up with higher THC levels in their hemp crops than they intended, particularly because a lot of times what I understand is this can occur due to things that the farmer can't necessarily control.
Yeah.
However, who knows what other jurisdictions will do with it. But I will tell you this, law enforcement people tend to be pretty practical, and they like to put their resources into things that make a difference, and there's not a lot, even in really conservative areas or anti-hemp or cannabis areas, not a lot that would be accomplished by criminally prosecuting a farmer who has a THC level that was higher than was expected. So, again, I'm happy to answer questions. Really appreciate the chance to be here. I've got another meeting that I've got to go to. I told Veronica I've got to leave at noon. But I think we'll wait for questions, right, until everybody else speaks.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Laura with the Agriculture Department in charge of the farming licensing.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm very happy to be here. I say me, but you as well. So even though you have experience with this crop, we all have a tremendous learning curve ahead of us this growing season. So I am the program manager for industrial hemp, which means that starting March 1, actually probably before March 1, we'll have the registration materials available. We'll be open, so to speak, to receive your registrations if you choose to grow industrial hemp for the 2014 growing season. And with that, there are several restrictions that we all have to meet. Those were designated by the Hemp Act, so I have copies of these if you want them. I don't know that it's exciting reading, but it's important because it lays out all of the restrictions that you will be facing if you choose to grow the crop. I encourage you to do your due diligence because while it's an exciting time, there are issues and a lot of misconceptions out there that I think we all need to address, so that you all need to be very aware of what restrictions you are under if you choose to grow the plant. So, for example, you will register with the Colorado Department of Agriculture. We'll take the necessary information. The Attorney General's office is going through the registration form that we've come up with right now to make sure that we are not asking you information that it is inappropriate to ask for. So believe me, we're trying to protect you as much as we're trying to protect ourselves. So we do not want to know certain pieces of information, and we won't ask for it. And so with that, you need to tell me where you're going to be growing the crop. I'll need the GPS coordinates. I will need to know, if you know, what the varieties of these crop, the hemp is, the cannabis is, because that will help us work together. I am charged with making sure that the crop that you are growing does not exceed the 0.3% THC, which, as Stan said, is in the Colorado Constitution. So if you do not agree with the levels that were set, you'll need to take that up with your state legislators and see if that can be changed. But at the moment, the 0.3 standard is one that I believe, from doing some research and looking around, is what Canada is using, as well as some other European Union countries are using. And so that, I assume, is why they took that 0.3%. There will be two types of licensure the research and development and that is commercial. There are some things that I think that need to be worked out with these registrations at the legislative level. I think that they may have made some mistakes, and so we have told folks that are in the lobbying position that this may need to be checked. But for example, it's very clear in the act, which we don't have a lot of control over at this point, that if you're going to be doing research and development, that it must be outdoors. And in all agricultural, horticultural settings, a tremendous amount of research is done indoors. And so I believe that that has to be fixed. Okay? So just so you know, we're going to have two separate registration pieces. On the commercial level, you are welcome to grow indoors or outdoors. There are no restrictions. If you do R&D, the restriction is that you are limited to 10 acres. So you cannot have more than 10 acres if it's under research and development. Okay. There are going to be costs associated with this program, and legislatively it was dictated that the costs are borne by the grower. The state or the taxpayers will not bear the cost of this program. You will. And so there's going to be there are registration fees. Part of the program is that we're going to go out and sample the crop that's growing in the field to test for the 0.3% to make sure that that's not exceeded. And the grower will have to pay all of those costs, including the lab costs and transportation costs, to take that sample between your field or your growing location and the lab which we are going to use. We're going to use our own Colorado Department of Agriculture lab. They know how to run these tests. They run pesticide analysis. They run all sorts of things, and it's not a huge leap for them to also run for THC content. So they are going to be doing that. I do not know how much they'll charge yet, so we're still working out those pieces. And one last thing that I'll say as part of registering, which was dictated in the Act, is that before harvest you will have to contact me, and we'll have to get information from you regarding who is going to be processing your crop, because it has to be an in-state processor, and the processing is going to be something that has to meet certain protocols. Mainly, what I want to say by this is, and we'll have to work it out with the advisory group that we have, is that the product that leaves Colorado, because this is a federally still regulated crop, it is illegal federally, whatever leaves Colorado cannot be propagated, which means that it cannot germinate, it cannot grow. And so however the processing is going to occur, we'll have to verify that whatever leaves is not going to be able to grow. Okay, so with that, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions later.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Ben Holmes talking about hemp science.
So I'm Ben Holmes. I live in Boulder. I've been here about 20 years, and I've founded the Centennial Seed Company. We're the first registered seed label in the state that deals entirely with cannabis genetics. I started in resin types and drug types. That was what the platform that was available to me to do work. And as hemp has come online, or is about to come online, I've shifted my interest to hemp. And the hardest issue of this entire thing is seed. That's a difficult thing. It's not going to spontaneously happen. It has to be imported at some point, which is the difficult thing that crosses federal lines and even state lines. That's a difficult problem. There are people working on this, and there are seed samples that find their way into the state in various ways, and we're continuing to collect those and work on them. What I really want to talk about is a research project that's begun at the Colorado State University, or excuse me, at CU Boulder. I almost blew that. It's called the Cannabis Genomic Research Initiative, and it's being run out of the Kane Laboratory, which is in Ramley Hall. And the fellow is Dr. Nolan Kane, and he has, in his career, mapped the genome of chocolate, canola, which includes all of the brassica, including broccoli and cabbage, and sunflower. And he's sequencing the genome is one thing. You can take a plant, extract the DNA, create a sequence, convert it into a digital file, and you have a sequenced genome. But knowing how that strand fits together and where those individual genes are and what they control and on what chromosomes they live is big science for this crop. And there are only a handful of crops on the earth that this work has been done for. Crops like sunflower, crops like canola that have huge economic impact have been the focus of these research groups that have this special ability, capability. Dr. Kane has said he can spend the rest of his life on sunflower, but he moved to Colorado and suddenly he had cannabis in his lap. And he's very interested in doing this. So their proposal is to create an ultra-high density genetic map and then publish that information as a public resource. That resource then becomes a platform for all of the innovation that can occur on this, from a biosciences standpoint, from people who work in labs, who study the genetics of plants and develop markers for certain traits or certain characteristics. All of that stuff is done on sort of indirect way with most crops. But the genetic mapping has only been done on a few crops successfully. He's the capable person, he's the right guy for this, and we're in the process of raising capital for it. We've applied for one grant, we're about to apply for another grant, and we've gone out to the industry and are looking for ways to fund this. But this will set Colorado so far ahead in the science on this crop that I don't think any state will ever catch up to us. This is equivalent to maybe the Wine Institute in Napa, which is run by UC Davis, and that's put that industry completely ahead of the entire winemaking world. It's unquestionable. So that's kind of my focus for this year, is to raise money for that and continue to work to develop seed stocks. We have an associate, a young man who worked for the seed company for a couple of years, who traveled to China for 2 years to satisfy his foreign language requirement. He needed to learn a foreign language, so he went to Beijing and learned Chinese and taught English at the same time. And while he was there, he made friends with the director of the National Breeding Program for the entire People's Republic of China. And he taught this fellow some English, and this fellow taught him some Chinese, and they walked through the trial fields. And probably an act of biopiracy, but this fellow managed to grab anyhow, that's back in Colorado, and it's been offered to me as a library to work with. So it gives us just a huge bump in terms of material, and that's kind of where I'm at. That's the update on that project, and I'll leave it to questions, I guess.
Thank you, Ben. Exciting. Okay, and then we have Jason Love, and after that we will take questions from the audience, so can you get your questions ready and who you want to direct them to?
Thank you very much for having me, Veronica.
Of course.
I appreciate seeing all of you here. I may slur my speech. You'll notice I'm having a little trouble talking. I had a car wreck about 2 weeks ago and went off one of the mountain roads, and I'm happy to be here. But in any case, I'm working on a handful of projects right now. As some of you know, Hemp Cleans is the foundation essentially for the regulation that we've created in Colorado, or at least the bills themselves. So I was involved in drafting HB 1099 and SB 241 over the last 2 years, which basically have gotten us here. And then, of course, 64 helped us with the definition, somewhat, of industrial hemp. And so that was exciting. It really brought us, leaps and bounds farther than we were just a couple of years ago. That said, we still have a lot of work to do, especially about the seeds. And I really want to just quickly note on the seed issue, my goal is to bring a group of people together to have this conversation about what has to be done.